I think the qualities of the sea that resonate with me are it's kind of expansiveness and like sort of depth and like the power to sort of make you feel small. I'm David Standridge, Executive Chef of the Shipwright's Daughter in Mystic, Connecticut, and this is my sea story. I became interested in the sea when I was little. My dad grew up on City Island, so I spent a lot of time on my grandfather's boat and just on the water, around boats. I grew up on a lake, so I sailed a lot on a lake, but then when my dad bought a boat in the early 90s, I started sailing in saltwater. We sailed up and down the coast. It's kind of where I discovered the seaport. Once you get it out of sight of land, especially at night, it's a special feeling. Living on a boat made me realize that you don't need a lot of things. I had like a tiny little closet. I like literally had room for 2 pairs of shoes and like 3 shirts. Just tiny amount of stuff. And I didn't ever miss having stuff. I just realized that I don't really need anything, like really to be happy. Material things aren't particularly important. My career choices have been around how far will I be from the salt water in particular. So that's how I ended up here. My career led to becoming a chef. It was a very circuitous route. I kind of did everything else. I worked in food when I was little. My first job was at Action Park in the wave pool snack bar at the pretzel station. My culinary career started. And then I went to college. I was an English major. I tried to be a writer. I worked in publishing. I ran the marine operation at a yacht club. I worked in coffee shops. I did some accounting. I did like kind of everything. And I kind of fell into restaurants. When I was bartending at this really cool restaurant in the West Village, I realized what I really loved about bartending was the making of things, and that was really happening in the kitchen, and that's where I wanted to be. So I went to culinary school, and the rest is history. New England's always really spoken to me. There's a romance about it, and I think it's always grew up thinking like Newport's the sailing capital of the world and the old America's Cup stuff, and just being drawn to this area. We started at Shipwright's Daughter when I moved here in 2019. The space of Shipwright's Daughter is a historic hotel. I think the building has been there for 200 years. It's quite old. It was really in need of rehab. There's a lot of just wear and tear, and it had to be kind of resuscitated during the building process. We tried to make it sort of as efficient as possible, but we also wanted it to be kind of a tribute to Mystic's nautical heritage. That's kind of where the name came from, Shipwright's Daughter. It was like the next generation of Mystic restaurants. So we wanted to feel nautical inside, but also modern. Shipwright's Daughter has an ever-evolving menu. It's changing all the time, and a lot of it is because of the fish and the process that we use. I really want fishermen to bring me whatever they caught. I don't want to ask them for a specific fish because I don't want them to have to go out there into the ocean and find it. I think that's silly. So if someone brings me sort of 50 pounds of fish and they're all different, then we have to figure out on the fly how to make that all work on the menu. And that takes a lot of creativity, but that's kind of part of the fun. The reaction to our menu has been really, really positive, even really from the beginning. Obviously now we've gotten some recognition with James Beard Award. When I moved here, the first thing I tried to do is really just find out where to get the products. I figured it would be so easy. And then I found that the fishing industry is really structured locally for export. And they're only fishing for a few species, and the idea is just to sell them to distributors and they get shipped off to other places in the world. And that was not okay for me, so I really wanted to get as much of that local seafood. I think local seafood is important for a lot of reasons. One, it's all about community for us, and so the part of our community is the people that fish and farm and grow things that we eat. And so we want to support that in particular, rather than having fish flown in from some other part of the world. This is the community that we live in, and we want to grow it, and that's an important industry. And especially it's important to protect our sources of food. Definitely learned in the pandemic that the big food system is very fragile, like it can just break. But the local food system is very, very strong if you keep it strong, and it really is something that's important to have. Fishermen are really struggling. The fishing industry is very hard anyway, and the regulations are very kind of burdensome. So small fishermen in particular really need our help to continue to be able to make a living on the water. My thoughts on winning the James Beard Award are that it's really important to get recognition when you're trying to do something that's a little bigger than just food. It'd be really easy to be successful in our space if we just had an Italian steakhouse, but we're not doing an Italian steakhouse. We're doing sustainable seafood, fish that people have never heard of, and it's for the greater good. But if we don't get people to write about it and talk about it and sort of give it that stamp of approval, then it won't work and we won't be able to continue. So awards like the James Beard Foundation or the Crazies Award, or just having journalists come in and take the time to write an article is really important to be successful in what we're doing. We recreated a recipe that is a tribute to Thomas Downing, who is a culinary entrepreneur known as the Oyster King of New York. He owned and operated Downing's Oyster House, one of the most famous and successful restaurants and catering companies in New York during the 19th century. Since he was the son of freed and slave people, he was able to buy his own land and opened a tavern and restaurant and started selling oysters himself. The dish was known as oyster pan roast, and it was adapted by Aidan, a Mystic Seaport interpreter, from a recipe in Sweet Home Cafe Cookbook for use here at the Buckingham Hall House, the oldest building in the Mystic Seaport Museum. This is a cool recipe. I love oysters, and just like this kind of old, to me this is like fisherman food, like kind of like the basis of like chowder, where it's just like a bunch of stuff thrown in a pot and we kind of make it work. And it's so simple and there's so few ingredients, and it's really just about the oysters and the fire. I think my connection to the sea is just one of sort of contemplative solace. Every time, for me, it's comforting to feel a little smaller than you are. It makes the other things going on in your life feel small also. So it's something that I've always been drawn to when things are kind of in a rocky phase. I want to go to the ocean, or I just feel most at peace when I'm on the water.